Okay, now after we rode Mount Gill that morning, we headed out down towards what's the name of the station? Alpana Station, because I wanted to do Mount Samuel. Now in this track you can see here near Mount Falkland, that's the Mount Samuel loop, that upside down U. You can't actually do it in that direction, it's only one way, and you need to go down to the actual Alpana Station itself to get the key and then ride back. So that kind of threw out our plans for the day because we wanted to do it on the way. So we headed down to Parachilna. I got a goat curry. We slogged past the Great Wall of China, which is a pretty cool rock formation. We did a loop through sort of the main road, I forget the name of it, but that's where you get to the lookout, Razorback lookout, which is probably the most famous road. You could really take a crawl through here, it's not hard at all, but it's a really easygoing road, a lot of really nice scenery. And now that the pole for my camera has broken, now I've got this low angle. So right here, we're more towards the southern end of the Flinders now. Definitely on rear tyre conservation mode, really the whole trip. I did this trip with a Shinko 804 or 805, whatever the rear one is, on this trip, and it didn't rain, luckily, because it's definitely not the tyre you want in the rain. We had fairly high pressures in the back, at least 33-ish in the rear. We didn't get any flats, but the tyre was severely cut up, especially after Mount Gill. And we had two more private tracks to do, Mount Samuel and Skytrek. So I had to try and make sure that the tyre would last, especially because then we needed to slap it on the tarmac on the way home as well. accommodation and see when we can do the Mount Samuel track.
Here we are at Alpana Station, out in the hut, 8 kilometres out from the main homestead. No one else near us. We've got some goats up on the hill up there, you can see, wandering around. Absolutely beautiful. It's the shower block and toilets over there. We've got the fire burning. It's a little bit smoky, but we got the fire going. It's inside the hut.
Right, the next morning, we're out of there, heading straight towards Mount Samuel track. Now the ride into this hut itself was actually really good. And now that we rode it on the way in, on the way out we kind of knew what we expected, so it could be a bit more spirited, as we would like to call it. up near the main homestead. We grabbed the keys from Mount Samuel and then we were out of there. Bit of a quick haul on the tarmac. We were given a map of some of the things to see around Mount Samuel. This is the Mount Samuel itself. We're looking out, that's towards the east. I think one of these peaks on the left is actually Mount Samuel itself. You don't actually get to the top of it. But again, this is still a rocky track, nowhere near as difficult as Mount Gill, but it was pretty cool scenery, a lot of change in scenery. Yeah, it was a very good ride. Yes, and that's looking west. Pretty sure it's one of the lakes out there. I can't remember the name of it. Maybe Lake From. back south towards the main road. You can see there are some rocks. The African twin is soaking it up. I think the thing with riding rocks is you kind of need to keep a decent speed and then you just skip over it, you know, make sure your suspension is sort of soaking up the first couple of inches of travel. It does help. The African twin that I have is the Adventure Sport's got a bit more suspension travel. We did skip ahead a bit here, but we went back to Alpana, we handed in the key, and we checked the radar the night before, and it looked like it was going to rain the next day, the last day of our trip, and we definitely know if, as soon as Skytrek gets a bit of rain, it's going to be washed out. So the caretaker at Alpana said, hey man, if you get on the gas and get straight to Willow Springs now, they might let you on the track, because usually they don't let people on before after 10, because it takes a couple of hours. You know, we did that Mount Samuel track pretty early, so we went straight down to Skytrek and we said, hey, we want accommodation and we want to do the track. And then he asked, at this point it was probably like 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock. He's like, hey, what are you guys riding? He said, oh, Africa Twin and DRZ. And as soon as he's heard the Africa Twin, he was like, oh no, I don't think, you know, how good a rider are you? So, you know, we had to humbly say that we are okay, right? Because we definitely want to get on the track, but we didn't want to be too over ambitious. And he's like, okay, right, we can go out on the track. So we went out, and yeah, it was a big track. It's like a 65 kilometer loop. It's probably the longest loop that we did. A lot of it is very open, like this. It's really only the last 5Ks where it gets a bit rocky and interesting. And even though we started the loop a bit later, about halfway through the loop we started passing four-wheel drives. So I think we did it in about an hour and a half or 2 hours. Yeah, and if you were hauling, you'd probably get it done in an hour and 15, hour and 30, maybe on a big single. Some of this landscape makes it look like I'm in Radiator Springs in the set of Cars, you know, Pixar Cars or something. You know, out, you know, Nevada, Utah. did give us a sheet with, you know, different kinds of plans, rock formations to look at, which would be useful if you're in a car. You could probably stop and smell the roses, but we were on the gas, you know, when I'm on the bike, not really stopping and looking at rocks. At this point we're probably 3/4 of the way through. Now the next stop will be, there'll be a gate where you get a key to do sort of the more difficult section. You can avoid the last couple of hill climbs if you want to, but when in Rome, you ride like the Romans. So this is the gate. You always have a 50% chance of opening the gate the right way. It's always the wrong way. Alright, now this last section of the Willow Springs Skytrek track, I'd say it's pretty, it's a similar sort of terrain to Mount Gill. Probably not as rocky in spots, but the sort of the main hill climb, you really just need momentum to get up it, and I'm just thanking my lucky stars that I didn't actually meet a full drive halfway up, because, you know, if you had to stop, you'd have to go down and start again. There's no way you're gonna start again from standstill halfway up that hill. But anyway, we've got a little while to go before we get there anyway. we're getting closer towards the hill climb, and I will just say after we left here, it did rain the next morning when we were starting to go to get on the tarmac, and we headed south, and we're at a service station, and I did bump into fellow adventure riders from the Wayne Dowsett channel. So we realized that Wayne and his crew were actually staying at Willow Springs while we were there, but you know, we didn't venture out far enough to see them. So they had a video there. So it's Adrian and Santiago that we saw, who were trailering their bikes back to Sydney. Now this is the side of the hill climb. We go to the top, there's a Fred Flintstone car, there's a couple of Bogdan Marges and their Prados. But yes, it's definitely a sigh of relief and a sense of achievement getting the Africa twin up there with no worries.
Alright.
And of course, here's the obligatory replay with the camera looking towards me so you can see sort of how much body English there was, like with one of the other clips I put through. Because the camera does a really good job at smoothing it out. It's funny watching back this clip, you know, 12 months after I actually went there. The camera makes it look so easy.
Made it up. Skytrek. Probably the most difficult one or the most difficult build. I've done that. I'll compare it to Gill. How difficult that was. The rest of the way it's been fairly easy going. The last 55 k's still away. The last 3 k's away. So we're not done yet.
No, we weren't done yet, and there were a few couple other sort of rocky, hairy hill climbs to go. So don't think once you've made it to that Fred Flintstone car, it's all easy going from there, because it isn't. That was a bit of a hairy haul. Don't remember that one. Yeah, you see, it wasn't over once you get to that that Fred Flintstone car. Snacks for dinner, and that's it. We were on the road home. So that's the Flinders trip. I'd definitely go back. If I went back, I'd probably take my DR650 and do some of the harder tracks again and spend a bit more time doing those. Yeah, that's all.